My aunt treated her goldfish like they were family. And back in the 80s, I stayed with my aunt and uncle in Columbia, South Carolina. And they had one of those old color television sets, you know, the kind that's got that nice hardwood finish along the sides, kind of like a station wagon from the Brady Bunch, gave off low levels of radiation that most parents were concerned about. Well, my aunt and uncle, they left me in a home alone with nothing to do but watch television. Problem was, television in the 80s in Columbia, South Carolina, was about as interesting as watching my aunt's goldfish all day long. That's unless you're a house cat, and house cats tend to get in trouble when they're left in the house all day long, especially when the only thing on television is televangelist, televangelist, pro wrestling, and B-movies. So I watched a lot of B-movies. And one thing I learned from those B-movies is that every mutant, every monster, every giant had one thing in common: radiation. Radiation from the atomic bomb turned them into giants. Kind of like the radiation in that television set there. So I ran my hand across that screen and I felt that static electricity, that radioactive glow. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could just run my entire body across that screen? I could become a mutant. I could become a giant. I could become the Colossal Man. But it was too late. Television was too small and I was too big. And that's when my inner house cat came out. And I looked at my aunt's goldfish tank, and I looked at the television set, and a light bulb went off in my head. Bling! Science experiment. I was going to take goldfish, run them across the screen through the field of static electricity and radiation, manipulating their DNA, creating giant mutant goldfish. And by the end of the day, Columbia, South Carolina was going to have one hell of a fish fry, and I would solve world hunger. So I took the first goldfish out of the tank, and, well, looking back, since the goldfish were kind of like family, let's call this goldfish Uncle Bob. And so I brought Uncle Bob to the TV, and there was a televangelist, and he was beating on his Bible, shouting, brothers and sisters, the end is coming near. So I brought the goldfish closer to the screen, and when my hand kissed that glass, it was like science and religion meeting for the very first time. And I took that fish, and I went, shoo. And I dropped Uncle Bob back in the tank, and Uncle Bob went, belly up. Then I took the second goldfish out of the tank, and I changed the channel, and let's call this one Peggy Sue. And there was Hulk Hogan. He had some wrestler's life in his hands, kind of like how I had this tiny little goldfish's life in my hands. And I went in the opposite direction to reverse the current. And I dropped Peggy Sue back in the tank, and the fish went, goodbye, Peggy Sue. And I shut that television off, and I just let it juice back up, and I just waited, and I waited, and then I turned that television set back on, and I went looking for another fish, and I said, let's take Jethro. And there was Godzilla and Mothra on Monster Island, and Godzilla was going, ah! And Mothra was going, whoosh, 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 and everybody was running like it was Armageddon, going, ah! And I had Jethro in my hands like the Colossal Man, and I went, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And I dropped that fish back in the tank, and the fish went. And by the end of the day, all the fish were floating at the top of the tank. And the televangelist was still beating on his Bible, shouting, but the volume was down. And it was like some surreal message from the book of Revelations about the apocalypse that was soon to come. And it did. My aunt and uncle came through the door. And they looked at the goldfish tank, and they looked at me, and then they looked at the old goldfish tank again, and my aunt said, Theodore, I had to bought these goldfish the other day, and they all dead. Lord, have mercy. And they looked back at me. They looked at me like I wasn't even family, like I was some spawn of Satan, a devil child. I had set out to solve world hunger, and I ended up getting sent to bed without dinner. Thank you.